In this class, we're going to talk about the collection methods for data. How do we go about collecting data in business? Now, here we're going to look at primary data collection. Primary means from the source itself. So we're going right back to the source. Secondary is when we're asking somebody else about their opinion about something. So we're not going directly to the something, we're going to that person who has experience of it. So primary research could be me doing research on climate change. I could go to the library and look up some statistics. That's primary research. Secondary research would be asking you if I could look at your data and perhaps use your data because you've done some research into climate change as well, let's say. So if I ask you, it's secondary, I'm getting it secondary. If I go to the library myself or go to the source myself, it's primary. So we're going to look at primary data collections, go into the source themselves. And there are various types we can use in business. For a start, we can use observation. We can just look at what's happening. And we could set up scenarios where we test out to see what customer reaction will be to, let's say, a change in the product. We have a prototype of the product. We make some samples, we take them out and ask the customers. We're sampling, but we're getting it firsthand. And we're observing their reaction to the product and even to the questions we're posing. So it's a natural setting and it's a field experiment. Now, it does minimize response bias. Sometimes when we answer, let's say in a questionnaire, we may not be very particular about our answers. We just do it to get it done, which is not a good thing and it's not a nice thing. But I think many people probably just tick the boxes. They don't give it a lot of time to think about it. They don't evaluate it, perhaps. They just do the job. They're trying to be helpful, but in so doing, they may be misleading their own preferences and hence misleading the investigator. The observation one is good because we can watch people and we can engage with them. The disadvantage of that is it does take time. And we also have a problem in trying to measure people's behaviour. If I ask you a question and you pull a face that suggests you're not happy, I don't know very much. The only thing I know is you are unhappy about something. I don't know about the intensity of your unhappiness. I don't know what it is exactly that caused the unhappiness. I'm only trying to read what I'm looking at, perhaps your face, which tells me you're unhappy about perhaps something I've said or something, some question, something, some area of investigation we're looking into. And you're unhappy about something. So I have to try and pick up on that. Observation does minimize response bias. If we ask people to write down what they feel about something, we can get all sorts of answers back. Mostly people are in a hurry. They don't want to spend time writing out what they feel about a product or what they feel about a situation. They want to tell us, get it out of the way, get it done. So there is a response bias if we ask people to do anything other than observation or watching them. And the final disadvantage as well, I said limited to measuring behaviour. Well, that is true. That's what we're looking at. So we're not looking at perhaps overall behaviour. Perhaps as a consumer, the thought and care that goes into making a purchase, the search that the person may make, the customer may make, looking for it, and so on. We're not looking into all of that. We're looking at a limited set of measures. And it is time consuming. And number 3 is important. It's also subject to the investigator bias. We've all got bias of some sort. We try to get over it, but excuse me, we all have bias. And the investigator will have bias, perhaps bias about the person, about where the person's been interviewed, about the accent the person has got, the way they appear, the way they're dressed. There could be anything which influences the investigator. It influences what the investigator is going to record for that interview, which is biased. It's not true, but it can happen. So communication, well, we have personal interview, and the advantages of the personal interview is it permits detailed and in-depth questioning and responses. That's a good thing about an interview. You can ask a question, get a response, and then have a follow-up question. What did you mean by this? And would you do that again? And follow-up questions. You get a greater insight into the person. And it does tend to minimize non-response. When somebody's asked a question, they tend to answer it. If they just sit there staring, well, there's something gone wrong. It's like the way we communicate wider in society. If I'm speaking to you in a class, let's say, you will speak back. You will answer and you'll engage with me and give me the information I want. So it minimizes non-response time, and that is important. The disadvantages, well, it's costly. We have to pay somebody to go and do it. We have to find the right people. They might go for the whole day and not find anybody suitable to interview. But that also introduces number 2, the interview bias. The interviewer may think, I don't want to interview this person. He looks aggressive. Or I don't want to interview her. She's not my type of person, whatever that means. People have prejudices and people have all sorts of ideas about other people. So whatever those biases are means that the sample collected will be biased as well. And the people using the sample for information will have to know and understand that this information can be prejudiced. It can be bad information. It's not information. It's just data, but it's misleading. It could be. So that's dangerous. And it could be, of course, that the interviewer is cheating. The interviewer might get paid for everyone that he or she interviews. So they may just make it all up and go back, and it's easier to make it up, to cheat, to lie, and go back and get paid. So it is open to abuse. A telephone interview, well, it's very convenient. Just dial a number. Unfortunately, the respondents nowadays may be becoming a little too bored or generally fed up with receiving unsolicited calls. And we all in our private lives, we have calls on the phone, we have messages that we didn't require, we have texts, we have all sorts of things happening to us that we didn't ask for. And they're just a nuisance, they're just annoying. So it's counterproductive. The people who send it, we don't like them. Maybe that's why they're sending them. They don't want to be liked. I don't know. The telephone interview also saves time. You don't have to go physically to somebody. You don't have to go by car or go by train or something to interview somebody. It saves time. You don't have to wait around, and you just phone them. It's if they're happy to have it done that way, then they're cooperative. Then that does save time, and it's also relatively inexpensive. There's no travelling expense or parking or time off, time to do it, time for travelling, which is dead time. Time travelling is not productive. So it's far better and more efficient. So it's less inexpensive. And there's also less interviewer and investigator bias when it's a telephone. They don't see the person they're speaking to. They don't have personal prejudices creeping in because they can't see the person. They're speaking to someone, but it's a disembodied voice almost. You're speaking to somebody that you don't know. You have no idea about them or their background or whatever. Perhaps you've got very little detail, but they've agreed to a telephone interview, and that's what you're doing. But it removes any prejudice you might have otherwise. The way they dress, the way they speak, where they live, what they work at. None of this enters into anything with a telephone interview. The disadvantage, well, some of the telephone numbers may be out of date, gone, and maybe no coverage. Perhaps there's a technical issue on the day. There's also limited length and depth of questions and responses. Excuse me. You can't get into real depth with the questions. You can go a little. You can ask for a follow-up. But what about a follow-up on a follow-up question, or a follow-up on a follow-up on a follow-up? I mean, that's getting a bit extreme. But in daily life, we can do it. If you say something, I can say why, and then you give me an answer, and I can say, but why is that, and why is that? And we can go down this proverbial rabbit hole where we're asking questions and getting deeper and deeper. But on a telephone, people will just hang up. They'll put the phone down. They don't want to be antagonized or treated in that way. There's also self-administered questionnaires. You send out the questionnaire to somebody and they fill it out themselves. Very cost-effective for large areas. There's no bias involved, and it promotes accurate results. People don't want to seem like they're foolish, so they will fill it out as accurately as they can. So there are quite some advantages here. Saving on travel, saving on the costs. There's an advantage. However, there are disadvantages. When we get a self-administered questionnaire through the post, we bin it. A lot do. So it doesn't have a chance. So the response rate is very low. And even if people do fill it out and send it back, they may leave certain questions unanswered, which again may wreck the whole purpose of the questionnaire, may destroy the whole rationale for the questionnaire. But of course also they can give inaccurate answers. So that also is a problem. Now the question formats. Well, respondents are given complete freedom to answer their own words in open-ended questions. Open-ended, it's open-ended. They can write what they wish in their own words. So they have great freedom in answering. So it eliminates forced choice. We're not forcing them to answer in a particular way or about a particular incident or thing. We're giving them freedom to just answer the question. And there's unlimited response varieties. So the respondent can relax and just write out what he or she thinks in the context of this question. So it's open-ended. It's good. But it has disadvantages. It promotes investigator bias. Sometimes when we're getting somebody to fill it out themselves and we're sitting there with them, the chances are we say, yeah, what that means is, no, you don't have to fill that out. Yeah, just expand this bit. So we are guiding them, and that puts in investigator bias, where we're leading them in a certain way. Responses are difficult to code and to analyze as well. Once we've got a paragraph, a small paragraph to each question off somebody for 10 questions, let's say, we have to take those paragraphs and code them. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to analyze it. If we have a survey of 200, now we have 200 response sheets, all in little paragraphs. How do we make sense out of that? How can we summarize it? And that's a difficulty. They're used for small-scale exploration. Small scale, maybe 3 or 4 people. We just do a quick survey of them. It does establish a rapport. It establishes a relationship with the respondent. So they get to know you because it's open-ended. They're dealing with a person who's filling out this form with them. It could be we look at the overall form for the structure of the form to see if it is configured in a way that is conducive to that particular respondent. We need to know if the questions are going to cause problems. And this is what I mean by see. If the question is going to cause problems because of socioeconomic background, education, whatever, is the wording correct? Does it assume that people live in a big house with a fast car, or are they more working people working in offices, or what is it? So we have to be careful. And it's also best for collecting facts. It's good open-ended questions are good for facts, where you're not seeking opinion. You're seeking the age of somebody, where they live, the area they live in, what they work at, what their profession is, blah, 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 blah. That sort of thing. That's it's good for that use. But after that, it is a problem. Closed-end questions are also used. Yes/no questions. Respondents are limited to positive or negative responses. So I pose a question to you and say, do you agree or disagree? Is it a yes or a no? That's all you've got. So it gets rid of my bias, because the questions are set perhaps by someone else. If I'm the investigator, I may have bias. Chances are I do. Depends on what happened to me in the day and how the traffic was getting to work and so on. So it gets rid of all of that bias because the questions are set and the answers are just a yes or a no. So it can be done very quickly as well. And the coding is very simple. It's either a yes or a no. It's either a 0 or a 1, if you like. We can code it very quickly. The disadvantage is it's very simplistic and it limits the range of commitment. Yes, no. What about people who are in between? Sometimes they're yes, sometimes they're no. Or what about people who just can't decide? And also the wording can cause biases. There's no opportunity for the respondent to question the question itself. What's meant by this question? So there are lots of downsides with that type of questionnaire as well. It's best used for something like a telephone interview or self-administered questionnaire, where there are, when the topic permits that, I should say. But a self-administered questionnaire, it's nice if you get a form to pose and say, please help us collecting data. The answers are all yes or no. So you just tick off the boxes very quickly and put it in the envelope and return it. It's easy. Whereas if you have to write a paragraph for each one, that's difficult, it's time consuming, you're not going to do it. Multiple choice questions, very famous amongst the student population. Respondents are limited to choose from more than 2 positions. Now the advantages, well, we set a question, let's say, and there are 4 possible answers. Or let's say there are 4 answers. One of them is appropriate. But sometimes if we're collecting, that's for an examination, I should say, that's for a test at a college or a university. But if we're using multiple choice in business, we might give 4 answers and say, which one do you prefer? And that may lead to a change in the design for the product or the way the product is marketed. It gives some information. You may ask the respondent to even rate the responses, say 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever. Number 1 is the best, number 2 is the second best, and so on. So it can be used in different ways. It does get rid of the investigator bias. It's quick responses. Coding is simple and inexpensive. We just take the answers, whichever it was. Permits greater range of commitment than yes-no questions. So there are advantages to this. Now, but there are also disadvantages. Good questions are difficult to write, and wording can cause biases. As someone who's worked in university and polytechnic backgrounds, I can say writing multiple choice questions for assessment is an extremely difficult task because of what we've got here. They're difficult to write, and wording can cause biases. It can lead the respondent to go in a certain way, so it has to be carefully done. Writing multiple choice questions is not an easy one, but once it's done and agreed and the paper is fixed, then it's wonderful. It's easy to use and to administer from there on in. Best used for personal interviews, self-administered questionnaire, telephone interviews if not too complicated. And also for testing students, as I said earlier. Rating scales. Respondent rates an attribute using the provided scale. So that could be a scale, ranging from 1 to 5. We could have a frequency scale. Always, sometimes, never. So instead of writing never, you just write 1. What was the result like? It was very good. That's a 4. Intensity scale. This is called sometimes called the Likert scale. So I strongly agree, I agree, neutral, I disagree, I strongly disagree. Now we can figure out the intensity of feelings that somebody's got, if they're telling the truth with the assessment. So we just ask them to circle one of those numbers. And we know that we've given them a question or we've given them a sentence. Do you agree that rugby football is the best game in the world? And lots of people agree. So now we know that people in that area like rugby football. So that information is good for people who produce the kit, the shoes, the jerseys, the footballs. They now know that there is a big emphasis on rugby football in that area, so that's where their marketing can be. So it picks up information like that. It's used quite extensively when we're trying to work out the feelings that people have towards something. You could say the government is going to build a new something in the city centre. How do you feel about this? Do you strongly agree we should have it, or how do you feel? And people say, well, I don't really have a lot of feelings either way. They're neutral. Mark it as a 3. The next person, how do you feel? Yeah, I like it. I think it's a really good idea. It'll put our town on the map. People will want to come here. So I agree. It's good. That's a 5. So give it a 5. And that's how we use that type of scale. Now let's look at semantic differentials. Semantic means words. We're going to look at the words that can be used here. Respondents' evaluations range between opposites. So we go from very good to very bad. That's the range that the respondent has got to play with. So they either like it a lot or dislike it a lot. But there are gradations here. There are feelings in between. So we could say, for example, do you think that the government should place more emphasis on education? We say, is that important to you? And some people say, nah, it's not. It's okay. It's not too bad. Well, that's maybe a 2. What do you think? Do you think the government should put more emphasis on education when it's spending money? Yes, I strongly think they do. That's our future. We need to. We do need more education. Well, that's a 5. Give it a 5. So, and we can do this for a lot of areas. Religion. We could talk about the health service. We could talk about lots of different areas and find out what people's feelings are. It's not a precise thing, don't forget, there are issues with it. And also, we don't have to have this 5-point scale that I've got. We could have a 3. It's nice to have an odd number because we've got one in the centre. For people who say, I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe, maybe not, I really can't decide. Well, that's the centre. So I've given, with 5 digits, I've got a centre one. The centre one is a 3. Well, I've also got, on the bottom, I've got a 3. So I've got a middle one again. That's a 0. So we give that a 0. Depending on which scale we're using. It's best used for personal interviews, self-administered questionnaires, telephone interview, if the item is not too complicated. So that's semantic differential. Now rankings. Well, respondents rank differentials among a group of alternatives. So here we've got radio, television, newspaper, internet. Where do you get your news? Where do you get your entertainment? Whatever the question is. We have a question. Where do you get your entertainment? Some people say, well, I get it first from the radio. I have the radio on all day. And where do you get your entertainment after that? Well, it would be television. In the evening, I get television. And what about newspaper and internet? Yeah, I'd have to put the internet third. I use the internet a lot, and I very seldom buy a newspaper, so that's number 4. So they may give you a response of that nature. So now you've got a picture of their rankings. Again, best used for personal interview, self-administered questionnaire, or telephone item if it's not too complex. Split and branch. Well, questions are designed to direct the respondent to different sections of the questionnaire. Nothing to say here. We get to a particular point in the questionnaire. Do you believe that the government should spend more on education? And the respondent says yes, in which case the next set of questions are not relevant. We flip on to page number 5, where it's all about the follow-up questions because of that split earlier. So we're able to navigate the question sheet. And that's the split and branch question. The question, do you believe? And say, yes, we do. Then in which case you continue. If it say no, then you go flip over to where the questions for the no section are, and continue with the no section. And that's it. That's what we've got for primary data collection. This is about 28 minutes long, so it's a bit over the top, but it's comprehensive, so hope you like it. Thanks for watching.